It begins quietly. He looks at you a little longer than he should. You laugh, he mirrors it. A current passes between you, small, invisible, magnetic. You tell yourself it's nothing, yet something in his eyes asks a question you can feel but not answer, and that's where most women lose it. They mistake that first spark for control. They start to give, to chase, to please. They start to earn what was already theirs in the beginning. They forget there are only three reasons a man truly falls in love, three ancient forces beyond looks, timing, or chance. You've seen it before. One woman walks into his life and he changes. Another gives him everything and he disappears. You've asked yourself why, what made her different, what made him stay, and why effort seems to push him farther away when your heart wants to pull him close. It isn't luck. It isn't the games people talk about. It's something older, deeper, carved into the psyche itself. And when you understand it, you will stop begging for attention. You will become the one who is remembered long after the noise fades and the world grows quiet around your presence. You've spent years learning the wrong language of love. You learned to text faster, to smile more, to pretend not to care, to play along with what you thought he wanted. And still, it never worked for long, because everything you were taught about love was written for women who fear their power. But love doesn't belong to fear. It belongs to those who understand how the psyche moves beneath words, how attraction is not chosen, but summoned, how devotion rises from depths where logic cannot bargain, and where certainty begins the moment you stop explaining yourself away. There are only three reasons a man gives his heart. You don't know them yet, but you've already felt them moving under your skin like tide and moon. They are present in silence and in distance, in the moment you hold your ground and the soul inside him turns to face you. You felt them the moment he couldn't stop looking at you. You felt them when his energy shifted as you withdrew, in the quiet that made him reach for you again. It wasn't manipulation, it was rhythm. You touched something in him that spoke a language he didn't know he remembered. When you learn this language consciously, everything changes. Your effort softens into ease. Your chasing ends in stillness. Your voice grows fewer words and more meaning. You become less available yet more present, and the field around you gathers his attention without force. Imagine this. You walk into a room, and men feel you before they see you. You speak little, but your presence bends the air. You are not loud, not needy, not performing. You are calm, anchored in something invisible, a gravity that does not ask permission to exist. The right man feels it instantly. He becomes curious, then protective, then devoted. He doesn't know why his reasons arrive later, but you do, because the psyche moves first and the mind follows. Desire wakes, then loyalty, and finally the quiet vow he makes in his chest, because you finally understand what every woman before you felt but could not name, the three reasons a man truly gives himself. Not tricks, not masks, not games, a law of soul that answers only to depth, to mystery held with warmth, to truth carried without noise. Your friends will see the change first. They'll notice you no longer chase or compare. They'll watch you listen without reacting and smile without explanation. They'll see how men who once ignored you now linger, and how the more silent you become, the more sought after you are. They'll ask, "What did you do?" You'll only smile, because there is no trick. There is only understanding of yourself, of him, of the pull that cannot be forced. You learned to stop proving and started allowing, and the world rearranged around your center. Your mother will feel it too. She'll stop worrying that you'll end up alone. She'll see you've stopped settling, that you are not lonely, you are selective. She'll sense you've become the kind of woman men can't forget, because you no longer forget yourself to be chosen. Even your past will begin to look different. Those heartbreaks that once felt like failure now look like lessons preparing you for this moment. You'll see that every man who left simply couldn't meet the depth that you now carry without apology or hurry. And the men, they will feel your absence before your presence. When you stop chasing, their instinct wakes. When you stop explaining, their curiosity ignites. When you walk away, their ego falls silent, and their soul begins to speak where excuses once lived. The kind man will grow attentive, the careless man will grow confused, and the right man will begin to listen the way men only listen when they've met something real, steady, unafraid, willing to stand still in the heat of his own rising feeling. Because when a woman embodies the three reasons, when she lives them rather than performs them, she becomes unforgettable. Not for a season, but for a life. Not for a game, but for a path. Not for drama, but for the peace he cannot find elsewhere. But let's be honest. You didn't come here just to hear words. You came because you're tired of patterns that never change. Tired of men warm one day and cold the next. Tired of trying to make someone love you with more effort, patience, and sacrifice only to lose yourself. You came because you know there must be a way to love without losing power. You feel it in your bones. The answer is not in doing more, it's in knowing more. In seeing clearly what awakens devotion and what only feeds hunger that forgets you tomorrow. Knowing what the psyche needs to awaken devotion. Knowing how desire moves in the unconscious. Knowing the difference between attention and attachment, between noise and vow, between being noticed and being chosen. When the room grows quiet, you came because you want to stop guessing and start commanding. Not with force, but with presence. Not with fear, but with certainty. Not with demands, but with the law that answers to stillness when your soul stands where it truly belongs. Imagine how your life will feel when you do. You will stop waiting for texts. You will stop explaining your worth. You will stop wondering why love feels like labor. You will move through the world as if gravity favors you, because it does when you stand in truth. Men will start confessing their feelings without you having to ask. They'll compete for your time, your attention, your peace. And you'll see how easy it always was, how what felt like struggle was only ignorance of a language your heart always knew. The woman who understands these three reasons doesn't just make a man fall in love, she makes him remember himself. In remembering himself, he remembers you, the mirror he trusts, the calm he seeks, the home he didn't know he could keep. That's why he'll need you not to fill a void, but to meet his own soul through you. Not to fix him, but to face himself. Not to own you, but to belong with you, where devotion is simple and the noise of the world finally fades. And one day, you'll look back at every love that failed and realize it was never because you weren't enough. It was because you were still speaking the wrong language, asking logic to do a mystic's work, asking speed to do a singer's song. Now, you're about to learn the right one. The one older than flirting, stronger than beauty, more binding than logic, the language of the psyche itself, the language of attraction that cannot be faked, the language that makes him need you by recognition. So stay. Listen closely, because what I'm about to show you next will change the way you see every man you meet. You will hear his soul behind his words and know where to stand, so that love comes toward you without being chased. Once you understand these three reasons, you'll never chase love again. You'll let it come to you because you'll know how, because knowing is the stillness that calls him forward, and certainty is the harbor where his wandering finally ends. You'll know how to move like mystery and speak like silence. You'll know how to awaken the part of him that doesn't just want you but cannot imagine life without you, when truth replaces performance and depth replaces noise. And that is the difference between being wanted and being needed. So stay right here. Don't skip, don't rush, don't guess. What comes next will teach you what every woman must know, the three reasons that make a man fall in love and the power they give you. There is a moment before attraction becomes visible, before a word is spoken or a glance confirmed, when two psychic currents recognize one another in silence. It is older than romance, older than speech itself, the instant in which the unconscious of one being touches the unconscious of another, and the surface of the world trembles slightly with meaning. You call it chemistry, yet what you sense is the field of the psyche awakening between opposites. The psyche does not fall in love by accident. It moves through invisible laws, compelled by the search for completion. When a woman enters a room anchored in her own soul, she disturbs this hidden equilibrium. Around her radiates a quiet gravity, not born of beauty or effort, but of inward coherence. The man who feels it does not yet understand why he cannot look away. His mind invents reasons, but his soul already knows. Something within him has been called. What he feels in that instant is not her personality, but her field, the resonance of a feminine soul that stands in its own order. The unconscious registers her before the eyes do. His breath slows, his language shifts. He becomes less sure of his footing because he has entered the presence of archetype. She represents to him the lost image of his own anima, the eternal feminine that lives within every man as the bridge to his depths. This is why he will often say, "I don't know what it is about her." He truly doesn't. The attraction is not personal, it is symbolic. The psyche remembers wholeness and sees in her the possibility of return. She becomes mirror and magnet at once, reflecting to him what he has forgotten and drawing him toward what he must become. If she understands this, she will not chase his attention, for she will know that the field itself is already working. The mistake begins when she leaves her center to pursue him. The field collapses and the spell dissolves, for what moves him is not her eagerness but her self-possession, the invisible assurance that she is complete with or without his gaze. When she begins to seek, she loses the gravity that first summoned him. The psyche responds not to pursuit, but to presence, not to demand, but to depth. You must see that attraction is a dialogue between two unconscious worlds. The ego only interprets the results. When a woman's inner life is neglected, she becomes noise. When it is cultivated, she becomes resonance. A man's unconscious is drawn to that resonance instinctively. He does not fall for the form of her face, but for the tone of her being, the music that vibrates behind her silence. This is why no strategy or imitation can reproduce true magnetism. The psyche cannot be deceived. It recognizes authenticity as it recognizes truth in a dream. When a woman adorns herself in pretense, the field turns brittle. When she stands in stillness, it grows alive. Her stillness does not mean passivity. It is the creative stillness of the earth before spring, of water that mirrors light because it does not agitate itself. There is an ancient rhythm in attraction: approach and retreat, glance and dead withdrawal, speaking and silence. It is the dance of polarity itself, the eternal movement of masculine toward feminine, spirit toward matter. When a woman understands this rhythm, she ceases to fear distance. She allows tension to breathe. The more she rests in herself, the more he feels compelled to cross the space between them. It is not dominance, but gravity that moves him. He may resist at first. The modern man mistrusts what he cannot name. Yet his dreams will begin to change. His waking thoughts will carry her image. She has entered the symbolic layer of his psyche, where archetype reshapes perception. He will imagine her in solitude, not as object of desire, but as presence he cannot forget. This is the moment the field becomes sacred, the threshold between chance and destiny. In this, attraction becomes initiation. The first look, the first silence, are not accidents. They are invitations to consciousness. For both, it is the beginning of a psychological journey, a path that will reveal not only their connection to each other, but their connection to the deep forces within. The woman who knows this never asks, "Does he like me?" She asks instead, "What in him has recognized what in me?" That question marks the beginning of power and of love that speaks the language of the soul. A man does not fall in love because he is entertained. He falls when he perceives a mystery within a woman that awakens the depth of his own being. He may not name it so. He will call it fascination, tenderness, or desire. But beneath these words lies the same truth. His unconscious has recognized in her a reflection of his own unformed soul. She becomes for him the mirror of his inner life, not by artifice, but by her willingness to dwell within herself. Depth cannot be imitated. It is the fruit of solitude and suffering. It is born when a woman no longer fears her own silence, when she has learned to descend into feeling without needing to justify or escape it. The man senses this immediately. Her eyes carry the weight of interiority, a knowledge of life's undercurrents that does not need to announce itself. He feels her presence as gravity, as the difference between surface and abyss. The psyche of man is drawn to this abyss, for within him lives an ancient longing to encounter the feminine as mystery. His world of reason, conquest, and logic exhausts itself upon surfaces. When he meets a woman whose soul reaches beyond them, he feels the pull of eternity. Her words matter less than her tone, her gestures less than the silence between them. Depth is felt not as performance, but as atmosphere, the invisible assurance that she belongs to something greater than approval. She must understand, however, that this power is not hers to manipulate. The moment she uses depth as seduction, it evaporates. The soul withdraws from pretense. What moves him is her authenticity, the natural consequence of having met herself. When she has walked through loneliness without shrinking, faced rejection without bitterness, and lived close to her own shadow, she emanates a truth that his unconscious cannot resist. He sees in her the reconciliation of opposites, tenderness and strength, warmth and restraint, light and darkness held without conflict. In her he senses the possibility of integration, the promise that his own divided nature might be made whole. The more she inhabits her contradictions, the more his psyche stirs. For it is not perfection that awakens love, but completeness, the presence of both angel and animal reconciled in one form. Depth demands patience. It cannot exist where fear rules. A woman who hurries to be understood reveals her insecurity. One who remains still allows the man to enter her mystery at his own pace. This is why some men, confronted with depth, retreat. The psyche resists what it cannot dominate, yet even in retreat, he remembers. Her presence remains in him as question, as unfinished, initiation. Often, he will test her unknowingly. He may withdraw affection, create distance, or provoke reaction. He is searching for proof of her reality, whether she is grounded in being or merely in display. If she remains composed, if she answers his withdrawal with dignity rather than pursuit, he will sense that her center does not depend on his recognition, and then his fascination deepens into respect. Depth is not sorrow, but serenity after sorrow. It is the calm that follows storms survived. The woman who carries it does not need to speak of endurance. It is written in her movements, in the way she listens without haste. Her stillness gives him permission to feel what he has long repressed: grief, tenderness, awe. In her company he becomes more himself, and therefore he calls it love. To embody depth is to understand that love is not a conquest but a descent. The woman who draws him inward does so by descending first into herself. She accepts that every true meeting requires the courage to be unknown, to surrender masks, to risk being seen beyond charm. He may not recognize this consciously, but his soul does. It leans toward her as toward water after drought. He falls for her not because she flatters him, but because she confronts him with reality. Her eyes tell him he cannot hide behind his cleverness or his strength. She does not demand his perfection. She calls forth his truth. This summons is both terrifying and irresistible. Every man secretly longs to be seen beyond his persona, to be met by someone who perceives the being behind the armor. When he encounters such perception, he yields not to her, but to himself through her. Thus, the first reason a man truly falls in love is depth. Not beauty, not charm, but the unmistakable awareness that beneath her words lies an ocean. He feels that if he were to love her, he might finally meet his own soul reflected in her gaze, and for a moment he senses eternity not as a promise, but as not presence. No magnet draws without resistance. No fire endures without air between the flames. Distance is not the enemy of love, but its secret instrument. It creates the tension in which feeling ripens from impulse into meaning. Every psyche knows this law, though the ego resents it. Desire grows only where something remains withheld. The man may not understand why his devotion wanes when the woman gives too much, too soon, but his unconscious knows the mystery that summoned him has been exposed before it could mature. In the earliest days of courtship, he is compelled by a force beyond reasoning. The woman who knows her own value does not rush toward it. She lets the current move of its own accord. She knows that distance allows the invisible to speak. If she meets every glance with surrender, the dialogue remains on the surface. But when she meets it with stillness, neither rejection nor offering, she preserves the symbolic space between them, and his imagination begins to live there. Distance is not absence. It is presence wrapped in silence. It is the archetypal rhythm of eros and logos, of the moon and the tide. The feminine embodies it through containment, the masculine through movement. When she holds herself, he feels the pulse of pursuit rise in him, not as game, but as recognition of polarity. He moves because she stands, he reaches because she remains. In this, both fulfill their nature. A woman who fears distance destroys attraction by filling it with noise. Her explanations, her assurances, her constant availability erase the tension that eros requires. The psyche cannot love what it fully possesses. Possession ends imagination. What man calls devotion dies when the beloved leaves him nothing to long for. He must feel that there is something yet unrevealed, something that belongs not to him but to mystery itself. Only then can his feeling deepen into reverence. The archetypes understand this. Every myth of the sacred feminine is woven with distance. The goddess never pleads, she waits. The knight rides toward her not because she commands him, but because her stillness evokes his courage. She is the temple he must approach in silence, not the market that solicits his coin. When the modern woman forgets this, she mistakes urgency for passion and performance for power. Yet the ancient truth remains: eros is born in tension, dies in excess. Distance is not coldness, it is the invisible contour of the soul that prevents merging into chaos. Without it, love becomes dependency, and devotion turns to fear. The woman who keeps her boundary does not build walls, she defines shape. She teaches him where she ends and where his respect must begin. Her silence is not indifference, it is trust in the natural law that what is real cannot be rushed. Often he will interpret this as challenge. The masculine psyche reads mystery as invitation to become worthy. When she steps back, not in manipulation but in natural rhythm, she awakens his instinct to grow. His better self begins to stir, for the distance reminds him of what he might lose if he remains unformed. He approaches her not to conquer but to cross the threshold into his own depth. In this way, distance initiates him. There is danger, of course. The woman who confuses distance with pride becomes statue, not temple. The goddess turns to idol when she forgets compassion. True distance holds warmth within it, the promise that the door may open, but only in its time. If she retreats too far, he feels rejection rather than rhythm, and the field collapses into despair. The art is in the balance, near enough for contact, far enough for longing. When the tension between them is rightly held, every meeting becomes charged. A word exchanged carries the voltage of silence behind it. A glance stretches between two worlds. He feels himself summoned, not demanded. In her restraint, he senses respect for the mystery unfolding between them. That respect invites his own. The psyche responds with devotion to whatever it cannot consume. This is why he cannot stop thinking of her when she steps away. Her absence fills his dreams with symbols. His imagination returns again and again to the unspoken promise. She has become the archetype of the distant beloved, the image through which his unconscious seeks transformation. The very space she keeps becomes the altar where his feeling matures from desire into love. The woman who understands distance never uses it to wound. She knows that love, like fire, requires both fuel and air. She withdraws not to punish, but to preserve the sacred tension where both can breathe. She trusts that what is true will bridge the space without her forcing it. This trust is her strength, and it becomes his awakening. For through the ache of distance, he learns longing, the soul's oldest prayer. The second reason a man truly falls in love is distance, the sense that she cannot be fully possessed, that there remains within her a region he may visit but never own. That unknown territory calls to something noble in him, the instinct to serve, to protect, to approach with reverence. In her self-containment, he meets his own incompleteness, and through her silence, he hears the echo of his own soul asking to be born. When depth has drawn him, and distance has refined him, the third movement begins devotion. It does not arise from sentiment, nor from the fever of desire, but from the mysterious recognition that in her presence, he touches something beyond himself. Devotion is the psyche's gesture of reverence toward the eternal feminine. It is the point where eros becomes sacred, where longing matures into vow. The man who reaches this state no longer seeks to possess. He seeks to serve the meaning that her being awakens in him. In her, he perceives the quiet order of soul that does not demand but inspires. The woman who knows her own depth and honors distance becomes a living symbol of the inner world. She embodies what his unconscious has always sought, a guide between spirit and matter, heaven and earth. Her eyes remind him that feeling is not weakness. Her restraint teaches him that desire is not enough. He begins to sense that love is not about having, but about becoming. Devotion is born in the moment he feels himself transformed by her presence. It is not submission to her will, but surrender to the reality she reveals. The man realizes that the love he feels cannot be reduced to appetite. It has awakened his conscience. Her stillness calls forth his strength. Her mystery summons his humility. Through her, he encounters the archetype of the sacred bride, not the woman who yields, but the one who sanctifies. This awakening is subtle. He may still speak of longing and beauty, but beneath his words lies reverence. He begins to act differently. His gestures acquire purpose. His instincts, previously restless, start to serve something higher. He listens, protects, and remains. The boy who sought excitement becomes the man who honors stability. In her presence, he senses the outline of his own integrity. To evoke devotion, she must remain true to her essence. The feminine destroys devotion when she confuses it with control. The psyche recoils when worship becomes servitude. The woman who demands what should be freely given turns divine energy into barter. But when she allows him to give without coercion, the field between them becomes sacred ground. His love then carries the fragrance of faith not in her perfection, but in her authenticity. Devotion has always been a form of remembrance. In the man's unconscious, the feminine is the image of the soul itself. When he finds a woman who embodies this image, he experiences the strange peace of recognition. He has found not merely affection, but meaning. Her being reflects his own latent wholeness, and he feels compelled to protect the symbol that has reunited him with his depth. It is not weakness that makes him loyal, but awe. To the outer world, devotion may appear as need. It is not. It is the natural response of the psyche when it encounters the eternal in the finite. When he says he would do anything for her, what he truly means is that through her he has met the divine. She has become the axis around which his inner life organizes itself. But this axis remains invisible. It cannot be seized or flaunted. If she tries to claim it for the ego, it vanishes like mist. She knows that what he worships in her is not personal, it is the light of the self reflected through her form. She becomes vessel rather than idol. Her task is to hold this energy without vanity, to let it pass through her toward the higher purpose it serves. This is the alchemy of love, the transformation of eros into ethos, of instinct into sacrament. When devotion matures, love ceases to oscillate between craving and fear. It becomes still. The man no longer seeks proof, the woman no longer seeks reassurance. Each feels the other as presence, as quiet certainty. Devotion is the marriage of strength and tenderness, of masculine fidelity and feminine constancy. It is the psychological completion of the erotic mystery, the moment when two souls recognize that they were never truly separate. Yet devotion does not mean permanence. Even sacred bonds may end, for form is transient. What endures is the transformation it brings. A man who has known devotion carries it into every future encounter. He can never again love superficially. The woman who has inspired it becomes part of his inner myth, the guide of his future evolution. She will live in his psyche, not as memory, but as symbol of the wholeness he once glimpsed through her. This is the third reason a man truly falls in love. Devotion, the impulse of the soul toward the eternal. He is not conquered by her beauty or her mind, but by the truth that flows through her when she stands in alignment with herself. In her, he meets the bridge between his mortal striving and his immortal longing. And because of this, he does not merely want her, he venerates her. He senses that by loving her rightly, he honors life itself. When depth has invited and distance has refined, devotion completes the trinity. It is the silence after the symphony, the still flame after the storm. Through devotion, love fulfills its final purpose, not to bind two egos, but to unite two souls in the shared remembrance of the divine that lives within them both. Every man who falls in love is, without knowing it, confronting his own soul. The image of the woman before him is both real and symbolic. She is herself, yet she is also the vessel of his inner feminine, the archetype I have called the anima. She is not merely his beloved, she is his mirror, his teacher, and his test. Through her, the unconscious calls him toward integration. That is why love feels at once intoxicating and frightening. The psyche senses that the meeting is not simply between two persons, but between man and his own depths. When he first encounters her, he does not see her as she is. He sees instead the reflection of the feminine within him projected outward. The unrecognized parts of his soul, his tenderness, his capacity for wonder, his intuition come alive in her presence. This projection is powerful, for it carries the weight of his spiritual longing. To him, she appears radiant, otherworldly, impossible to forget. He may call it destiny, but it is psychology, his inner image clothed in living form. This process is not illusion, but initiation. Through projection, the psyche introduces consciousness to what it lacks. The danger lies not in falling in love, but in remaining unconscious of the projection's nature. If he believes she is the ideal, rather than the mirror of it, he will attempt to possess her. He will demand that she maintain perfection, that she never falter or reveal humanity. Inevitably, she will disappoint him, for no woman can sustain the weight of a God image forever. And then love turns to resentment. The angel becomes ordinary, and he feels betrayed by the very symbol that once saved him. But if he has courage, he will use the disillusionment as turning point. He will ask, what in me sought this vision? What part of my own soul was revealed through her? When he withdraws the projection, the energy that once bound him outward returns inward, enriching his own personality. He becomes capable of emotion, imagination, empathy. He discovers that what he adored in her was the unlived life within himself, and thus begins individuation through love. The woman, too, plays a crucial role in this unfolding. When she recognizes that she has become the bearer of his anima, she must choose whether to feed the fantasy or to remain grounded in her own reality. Many women mistake his worship for genuine intimacy, but worship is not yet love. It is fascination with the archetype moving through her. If she identifies with the goddess image he projects, she loses her own center. She becomes actress in his dream rather than subject of her own story. True power lies in remaining herself. When she holds her individuality within the glow of his projection, she transforms the dynamic from illusion into revelation. Her refusal to become idealized forces him to see the distinction between woman and symbol, between reality and image. This confrontation, though painful, matures his love. It moves him from fantasy toward understanding, from dependency toward devotion. In this way, she becomes not the object of his growth, but its catalyst. In myth, the anima appears in many forms: the maiden who guides the hero, the sorceress who tests him, the queen who grants wisdom. Each represents a stage of his psychic development. At first, she enchants him with beauty. Later, she challenges his pride. Finally, she instructs him in the private language of the soul. The woman who embodies these qualities externally performs for him the work his unconscious would otherwise do in dreams. Through her, he meets his fate. Yet this dynamic affects her as well. To be the mirror of another's soul is no small burden. She may feel drained, seen yet unseen, worshipped yet unknown. If she does not nurture her own interior life, she will feel used by forces she cannot name. She must remember that she, too, possesses an inner masculine, the animus, and that her own individuation depends upon balance between receptivity and assertion, feeling and thought. Only when she lives from her inner wholeness can she meet his projection without being consumed by it. The relationship between a man and his anima, when made conscious, becomes the foundation of true partnership. He no longer demands that the woman carry his soul for him. He honors her as companion in mutual transformation. She, in turn, ceases to confuse being needed with being loved. Together they serve a greater purpose: the realization of the self through the union of opposites. Each becomes mirror and guide for the other. You may notice that when love matures in this way, both partners begin to resemble one another, not in manner, but in depth. The man gains softness, the woman gains strength. He learns to feel, she learns to stand. Their psychic boundaries remain distinct, yet something larger flows through both. The energy that once oscillated as projection now circulates as shared vitality. Love, purified of fantasy, becomes participation in the eternal dance between masculine and feminine. When a woman understands the law of projection, she ceases to resent the weight of his gaze. She sees that what he worships in her is a message from his own soul, and she allows him to receive it without mistaking it for personal flattery. She becomes guardian of the threshold between illusion and revelation. This is the essence of the feminine principle, to stand at the meeting point of the inner and the outer worlds, mediating between them with compassion and strength. Such a woman radiates an atmosphere of reality. Her presence does not entice, it invites. The man feels that with her, life gains meaning, not excitement. He senses that she has seen through him, yet does not condemn. She is not the dream that vanishes at dawn. She is the dawn itself, clear, patient, inevitable. When he is near her, his heart quiets. For the first time, he feels at home within his own being. In the end, the feminine principle teaches him what no philosophy could, that the soul is not an idea, but a living mystery. Through her, he learns to love the invisible, to trust feeling as a form of knowledge, to honor life's cyclic nature. She is the initiatrix who leads him from the head to the heart, from striving to stillness. Every man who has truly loved a woman has walked this path, whether he knew it or not. And every woman who has allowed herself to be loved deeply has served as priestess of this eternal right. To understand this is to see that love is not merely personal drama. It is the psyche's method of awakening. The man pursues his anima through the form of the woman, while the woman learns through him to trust her own animus, her will, her independence, her word. The encounter between them, with all its pain and wonder, is the alchemical marriage in miniature. Through their union, something greater is born, consciousness itself. So the fifth movement of our journey returns us to the core truth beneath all the earlier lessons. Love is not about mastery or persuasion, not about making another fall, but about revealing what already lies within. The man does not truly fall for the woman alone. He falls into himself through her. And she, if she remains awake, becomes the vessel through which he meets his soul, and through that meeting, she remembers her own. When a man truly encounters a woman who embodies the living, feminine depth, distance, and the mysterious devotion that neither yields nor demands, his soul begins to move in ways he does not understand. What awakens in him is Eros, the ancient god who wounds in order to reveal. The arrow that pierces his calm is not merely desire, it is the call to transformation. His outer life, built upon reason and control, feels the tremor of something older and wilder rising from below. At first, he mistakes this stirring for conquest. The masculine mind, schooled in separation, interprets longing as pursuit. He believes he must win her, yet what he truly seeks is not possession but unity, a return to the forgotten rhythm that once joined the opposites. In her eyes, he glimpses a world where thinking and feeling, strength and tenderness, no longer oppose one another. This vision both fascinates and terrifies him, for to enter it, he must surrender the defenses that define his identity. When he meets such a woman, she disturbs his carefully constructed ego. Her silence mirrors his own inner emptiness. Her steadiness exposes his restlessness. He finds himself speaking differently, listening more, questioning what once seemed certain. The psyche has begun its alchemical process, the melting of rigidity into fluidity, of will into wonder. The woman's presence acts as catalyst, and within him, the lead of habit begins to dissolve into the gold of consciousness. Yet Eros is not gentle. He demands sacrifice, the relinquishment of superiority, the humility to feel. The man who resists this descent will experience the relationship as torment. He will oscillate between adoration and fear, intoxication and retreat. The more he clings to control, the more violently the unconscious rebels. His dreams may fill with images of pursuit, of drowning, of unfamiliar lands. These are messages from the depths, urging him to abandon mastery and learn devotion. The transformation of Eros follows three movements. First comes infatuation, when the unconscious projects its image upon the beloved. She becomes ideal, flawless, radiant with the light of his soul. Then follows conflict, when reality shatters the projection and he sees her humanity. Finally, there is integration, when he recognizes that what he loved in her was the reflection of his own potential. Only then does love become real, not projection, but participation in a shared mystery. This process mirrors the stages of alchemy. The first, nigredo, is confusion, the blackening of the old self as it confronts the fire of feeling. The second, albedo, is purification, the cleansing of illusion through pain and reflection. The third, rubedo, is illumination, the discovery of the self shining through relationship. Every man who dares to love deeply becomes an alchemist, though he may not know it. The woman's soul provides the vessel, his vulnerability, the heat. Through her, he meets his own shadow. He realizes that the same energy that makes him protector can also make him tyrant, that his intellect, once his pride, has served to avoid feeling. Love brings these opposites into collision, and from their friction, consciousness is born. She is both wound and medicine, the door through which he must pass to meet himself. Without her, his life would remain efficient but flat, organized but soulless. The woman of depth will notice his turmoil. She must not fear it. His withdrawal, his silence, even his resistance are signs that the old order within him is dying. The masculine psyche does not surrender easily. It clings to achievement, to rationality, to pride. Yet each encounter with her authenticity weakens its walls. Her quiet acceptance of his uncertainty does more than persuasion could. She mirrors to him the truth that strength need not be armor, that surrender is not defeat. As he learns this, his way of loving changes. He becomes attentive without anxiety, assertive without domination. He no longer seeks constant reassurance, for he feels the connection as inner continuity rather than outer possession. His devotion grows not from fear of losing her, but from gratitude for the transformation she enables. He begins to serve love as one serves a calling, not for reward, but because the act itself gives meaning to existence. The greatest danger in this process is inflation. When a man first experiences the awakening of Eros, he may believe he has found salvation. The intensity of emotion convinces him that he has transcended ordinary life. But this is illusion, the intoxication of the archetype. Unless he grounds the experience in humility, he risks confusion of divinity with personality. The moment he declares her his muse or his savior, he mistakes symbol for object. To love truly, he must bring heaven down to earth, to see her as woman, not goddess, and himself as man, not worshipper. In time, the transformation of Eros changes his entire orientation toward life. Work, ambition, and friendship all gain depth. The same energy that once sought conquest now seeks creation. He may discover art, contemplation, or service. He no longer flees emotion. He learns to dwell within it. The woman's presence has taught him the language of the soul, and he begins to speak it in all that he does. This transformation is not hers to manage. It belongs to him. She cannot save him from the pain of awakening, nor should she. If she tries to guide too much, he will lean on her, instead of growing through her. Her task is to remain centered, to allow his process to unfold while preserving her own wholeness. She is the vessel, not the fire. The alchemy must burn within him until he claims the gold for himself. The mature man who has undergone this initiation becomes both tender and strong. He no longer fears emotion. He reveres it as the language of the gods. He no longer seeks domination. He desires communion. To such a man, love is not a game but a path. He recognizes that every woman he meets thereafter carries some echo of the first who awakened him, yet he does not confuse the echoes with the source. He honors each connection as another conversation between consciousness and soul. In this stage, Eros transforms from desire into meaning. The man discovers that what he truly loves is not the woman alone, but the reality she represents, the union of opposites, the reconciliation of body and spirit, the possibility of wholeness. This is why his devotion deepens even when the relationship ends. The form may fade, but the essence remains, transmuted into wisdom. He carries her within him as inner feminine, the bridge to his own unconscious, the voice that counsels him in dreams and guides him in solitude. Such a man becomes capable of inspiring love in return, for he no longer seeks to be completed. Having integrated his anima, he meets women as equals, not as saviors or prizes. His presence becomes calm, magnetic, creative. Others feel it as reliability, but it is more than that. It is the peace of one who has wrestled with Eros and survived. He has learned that love's purpose is not happiness but wholeness, and through that understanding he becomes truly desirable. The transformation of eros is thus the turning point of both masculine and feminine evolution. The man learns to descend from power into feeling. The woman learns to hold feeling without losing power. Together they enact the eternal dance of polarity that sustains the cosmos. Through one another, they become instruments of the self's unfolding, two halves of the same rhythm, two mirrors facing the infinite. So when he says he needs her, it is not weakness but awakening. He needs her not as possession but as reflection, as compass, as reminder of what he is becoming. She does not diminish him by evoking devotion. She ennobles him by summoning his highest possibility. For the true masculine, to love such a woman is not to lose freedom, but to discover purpose. Eros, once wild and blind, becomes the guiding star of consciousness, and through its light, man becomes whole. Every light casts a shadow, and love is no exception. Where Eros enters, so too does its twin possession, fear, and the longing to control what awakens awe. No human being can encounter the sacred without first mistaking it for the personal. Thus, the same energy that brings two souls together also threatens to enslave them. The psyche, when it tastes divine intensity, seeks to grasp it with mortal hands. This grasping is the beginning of the shadow of desire. The man who has not yet understood the nature of Eros believes that what he feels belongs solely to her. He will demand her presence, her constant assurance, her conformity to his image. He imagines that by binding her, he can keep the feeling alive. Yet every attempt to possess kills what it seeks to preserve, for love thrives only in freedom. The goddess who allowed herself to be captured would no longer be divine. What he calls love then becomes compulsion, the ego's attempt to control the unconscious. Likewise, the woman may become ensnared in her own shadow. Having discovered her power to move the man's soul, she may use it to dominate rather than to illumine. She might delight in his adoration, mistaking projection for proof of worth. If she builds her identity upon his worship, she becomes prisoner of the very power she wields. When his fascination wanes, as it must when projection dissolves, she feels abandoned not because he deceived her, but because she was living through his gaze rather than her own light. The shadow of desire always appears as excess, too much giving, too much taking, too much fear of loss. It whispers that love must be earned or protected. It breeds jealousy, competition, performance. Behind it lies the ancient wound of separation, the terror that without the other, one will cease to exist. This is the illusion of the ego, which believes that love's purpose is possession. But the soul knows differently. Love's true aim is union through transformation, not ownership through control. When the shadow of desire is ignored, relationships turn into battlefields of projection. Each partner accuses the other of withholding what the psyche itself refuses to cultivate within. The man demands reassurance because he has not made peace with his inner feminine. The woman clings because she has not yet trusted her own inner masculine to stand alone. Each becomes mirror and enemy to the other. The greater the repression, the more violent the mirror's reflection. To bring light into this shadow, both must learn to separate passion from dependency. Passion is the movement of energy toward life. Dependency is its imprisonment. The man must recognize that his need for her is symbolic, the call of his soul to become whole. The woman must understand that his devotion, though genuine, cannot replace her own relation to the self. When they see this, the binding cords loosen. Love breathes again, no longer suffocating beneath the weight of fear. The shadow often manifests as the repetition of patterns. One meets the same kind of partner again and again, as if drawn by fate. But it is not fate, it is the psyche's insistence that we confront what remains unconscious. Each disappointment is a message left unopened. The woman who continually meets men who cannot stay must ask, where within me do I abandon myself? The man who seeks perfection must ask, what within me is so wounded that it cannot bear reality? Until these questions are faced, desire remains imprisoned in shadow, and love becomes rehearsal for pain. There is also the collective shadow, the inheritance of centuries of imbalance between masculine and feminine. The masculine, afraid of its own feeling, has sought to dominate. The feminine, denied its voice, has learned to manipulate. Both carry guilt and resentment so ancient that it lives in the blood. When man and woman meet today, they do not meet alone, they meet through the ghosts of history. To bring consciousness into love is to redeem not only oneself, but the collective memory of the sexes. In dreams, this shadow often takes monstrous forms. The beloved may appear as devouring serpent, as witch, as seducer, or the lover may become predator, tyrant, betrayer. These figures are not omens, but teachers. They show the aspects of desire that must die before love can live. When we face them without denial, we reclaim their energy for creation. The same fire that destroys when unconscious becomes warmth and light when understood. Every shadow, once acknowledged, becomes doorway. The man who admits his fear of dependence learns compassion. The woman who admits her hunger for control discovers humility. Each gains what the other lacked, and together they create balance. This is the alchemy of the heart, transforming poison into medicine, illusion into insight. The work is painful, for it demands honesty and surrender. But without it, there can be no real union, only repetition of the same unconscious dance. You will know that you are facing the shadow when love no longer feels effortless. When attraction becomes conflict, when admiration turns to blame, when the urge to connect is mixed with resentment, these are the signals that Eros is asking for depth. Do not flee this moment. It is the crucible in which desire burns away its impurities. If you endure it consciously, love will emerge, purified, clear as crystal, stripped of fantasy and fear. The woman who can hold herself steady while the man wrestles with his darkness becomes his greatest ally. Her calm presence tells him that feeling does not destroy but heals. The man who can acknowledge her autonomy without retreating into pride becomes her safety. Together they stand at the edge of chaos and discover that the monster they feared was only the unclaimed part of their own soul. In this integration, desire becomes transparent. It no longer seeks to consume, but to communicate. Each sees the other not as object, but as mirror of the divine. The tension between them remains. It must remain, but it is now creative, not destructive. The same energy that once demanded ownership now gives birth to art, compassion, and wisdom. The shadow of desire never disappears entirely. It simply becomes conscious. Every love, even the most enlightened, carries traces of jealousy, fear, and longing. But when these are recognized as aspects of the human condition, they lose their tyranny. To love without shadow would be to live without depth. And so the task is not to banish desire, but to purify it, to make it servant of the soul rather than slave of the ego. When man and woman achieve this, their love ceases to oscillate between pain and pleasure. It becomes rhythm, like breath, inhaling separation, exhaling unity, each moment renewing the other. Thus the shadow, once feared, reveals itself as guardian of transformation. It is the night through which love must pass to find its dawn. Without it, the union of opposites would remain a dream. Through it, the dream becomes incarnation. And in that incarnation, the psyche learns the final lesson of Eros, that even the darkest desire, when faced with courage, leads back to light. After the long labor of love, when shadow and longing have both played their part, the psyche begins to arrange its fragments into order. The tension that once divided becomes the bridge between worlds. This is the beginning of integration, the quiet phase of union, where opposites cease their quarrel and learn to serve a single center. It is not triumph nor surrender, but reconciliation, not the conquest of darkness, but its illumination. Here, the woman who once sought to be chosen now stands chosen by her own soul. She no longer performs to be seen, for she has learned that visibility without depth is emptiness. The man who once sought to possess now learns to perceive. What he adored as mystery, he now recognizes as meaning. Between them grows not drama but dialogue, not hunger but harmony. Love matures into an act of consciousness, the awareness that self and other are threads of the same eternal fabric. The union of opposites is the oldest theme of the psyche. Every myth and every religion carries its echo. The marriage of sun and moon, the serpent coiled around the staff, the child born of spirit and matter. This union is not achieved by denial of polarity, but by allowing each side to recognize itself in the other. Within the man, the anima becomes companion rather than phantom. Within the woman, The animus becomes protector rather than tyrant. The energies that once projected outward now circulate inward, forming a living mandala of balance. To reach this harmony is to accept contradiction. Love is both rapture and restraint, freedom and fidelity, self and surrender. When one pole is excluded, the other becomes cruel. The psyche seeks to hold them together without collapse, to feel both joy and grief as equally sacred. That is why true union often appears simple to the world but feels vast within. It is the simplicity of equilibrium, not of ignorance, the peace that contains all storms. In this stage, eros ceases to be restless. It becomes still flame rather than burning fire. The lovers need no longer define or defend their bond. It exists in the quiet between them. They may live together or apart, speak or fall silent, and still the thread remains unbroken. Their connection is no longer personal dependence, but shared participation in something impersonal and divine. They have entered what the ancients called the conjunctio oppositorum, the mystical marriage within the soul. The symbols of this union appear spontaneously. One dreams of a circle enclosing two figures, another sees the sea and the sky merge at dusk. These are images of completion. The psyche is telling its own story through pictures, assuring consciousness that the work of division has ended. The opposites, long estranged, are at last in conversation. The inner marriage has been consummated, not by annihilation of difference, but by the recognition that difference itself is the expression of unity. In outer life, this integration expresses itself as calmness. The woman who has united her inner masculine no longer fears solitude. She acts decisively, speaks clearly, loves without subservience. The man who has embraced his inner feminine no longer hides behind reason. He feels deeply, listens fully, and leads without arrogance. They meet as equals, each whole in themselves, each mirror to the other's completeness. What they share is no longer need, but participation in the greater movement of the self. Yet even here, consciousness must remain vigilant. Integration does not mean finality, it means rhythm. The psyche, like the tide, alternates between unity and separation, between clarity and confusion. The marriage of opposites must be renewed daily in the small gestures of life, in patience, forgiveness, and self-reflection. The moment one side denies the other, imbalance returns and the cycle begins anew. But now, the individuals know the pattern. They recognize the ebb and flow as life's heartbeat rather than life's failure. This inner union changes one's perception of the world. What once seemed fragmented begins to reveal hidden correspondences. The outer becomes symbol of the inner. Every encounter carries meaning. The beloved's face in the crowd, the turning of a leaf, the silence of dawn, all mirror the same essence. The soul perceives that reality itself is composed of opposites seeking harmony, death within birth, loss within gain, solitude within communion. To live in awareness of this pattern is to live religiously, even without creed. Integration is not withdrawal from desire, but its transfiguration. Desire now moves freely between body and spirit, knowing itself as both. The physical act of love, once bound by tension and expectation, becomes sacrament, not performance, but prayer. The lovers no longer seek to prove or to heal. They express the eternal dance through which creation renews itself. Such love, whether consummated or simply contemplated, belongs to eternity more than to time. In this state, power becomes gentleness, and gentleness becomes power. The masculine learns the strength of yielding. The feminine discovers the firmness of presence. They are no longer reflections of one another's longing, but embodiments of each other's wisdom. The woman's stillness no longer evokes pursuit, but partnership. The man's devotion no longer demands worship, but understanding. Together they embody the balance that the unconscious has always sought to realize through the game of attraction. Life continues, unpredictable as ever, yet the soul no longer trembles. One learns that opposites will always exist, light and dark, hope and doubt, closeness and distance, but within the self they coexist without conflict. The psyche has accepted its dual nature, and through that acceptance, it becomes whole. This wholeness radiates outward, drawing others not through desire, but through peace. The woman who once sought love becomes its source. The man who once feared weakness becomes its guardian. To integrate love is to know that no one completes another. Each reveals the whole that was hidden. The beloved was never the goal, but the mirror of the journey. When two souls recognize this, they cease to cling. They walk side by side through life's flux, each aware that love is not possession but shared consciousness. They may part or remain, but the inner connection persists, for it belongs to eternity, not circumstance. This, then, is the true union of opposites, not a fantasy of constant harmony, but the steady awareness that life is polarity woven into pattern. Eros and logos, man and woman, giving and withholding, all are threads in the tapestry of the self. When we cease to resist the opposites and instead let them play through us, we discover the quiet joy of participation in wholeness. Love ceases to be struggle and becomes state of being. And from this inner marriage arises a new kind of radiance, subtle but unmistakable. It is the glow of the integrated soul, neither masculine nor feminine, but both. It is the gaze that no longer searches outward for completion because it sees the world itself as beloved. In this gaze, all conflict dissolves into wonder, and the psyche rests at last in its own peace. When the work of reconciliation is complete, what once sought outward returns inward. The woman who has walked through longing, distance, devotion, and the dark waters of desire stands now as vessel of her own soul. She no longer asks how to make love stay, for she has become the place where love resides. Her presence, once dependent on recognition, now radiates of itself calm, magnetic, self-possessed. In her, the opposites have found a home, and because of this, she becomes the home to others. Men will feel her before they see her. They will speak of her serenity, of how she changes the room without effort. Yet she does nothing. She simply is. She embodies what alchemy called the lapis philosophorum, the stone of wholeness, born of fire, refined through suffering. Having passed through shadow, she no longer fears it. Having known the heights of love, she no longer chases them. In her stillness, man's restless soul finds reflection, and what he calls need is the instinct of his psyche, recognizing its own completion mirrored before it. To say that she has power is misleading. Power implies exertion, and she exerts none. Her influence arises from alignment with the self, the invisible center that unites consciousness and unconsciousness. Through her, the divine manifests in human form, not as perfection, but as presence. The feminine has become transparent to the eternal, and whoever stands before her senses it. She is not goddess, but gateway, not myth, but meaning made flesh. This transformation did not come by control. It came by surrender, by yielding to the cycles of attraction and loss, by listening to dreams instead of noise, by trusting that what departed was not punishment but process. She learned that the psyche never takes without giving. It only exchanges one form of attachment for another of greater truth. Through every heartbreak, she was shaped into a vessel, purified of fear, capable of containing love without dissolving in it. Now she understands that to make him need her is no longer the goal. For need implies lack, and she has transcended lack. What binds him to her is not absence, but recognition. His soul sees in her the image of wholeness it has always sought. The connection is not built upon dependency, but upon memory, the ancient memory of harmony between masculine and feminine, the forgotten equilibrium of spirit and matter. When he stands before her, he feels this harmony stir within himself, and for a moment he becomes whole. That is why he cannot forget her. She does not mistake his response for personal triumph. She knows it is not she alone he loves, but the reflection of his own awakening. She holds this knowledge gently, without pride or apology. Her task is simply to remain transparent, to let meaning flow through her without claiming ownership. Like clear water, she nourishes without boasting. The moment she clings to power, the current turns stagnant. But when she lives as conduit of the self, everything around her grows. Her love has changed shape. It is no longer a reaching outward, but a radiating inward, a warmth that embraces without intention, that gives without depletion. Those who meet her feel understood, even in silence. Her eyes carry the calm of one who has made peace with opposites. Her words fall rarely, but with the weight of truth. She no longer argues, for she knows the psyche persuades by resonance, not reason. Her authenticity is her eloquence. In her relationships, she offers companionship rather than completion. She no longer fears solitude, for solitude to her is sacred conversation with the unseen. The man who joins her must bring his own wholeness, otherwise the imbalance will dissolve him. He will either rise into consciousness or retreat into avoidance, for her presence exposes the unexamined depths within him. To love her is to be summoned toward one's own evolution. When he rises to meet her, a new kind of partnership is born. It is not romance as the world defines it, but communion, two individuals standing as mirrors of the same divine source. They give without losing, receive without clinging. Their love is no longer transaction but transformation, no longer intoxication but illumination. They become living symbols of the conjunctio oppositorum, the marriage of the inner and outer worlds through which the self is made manifest. But she does not depend on this union for her meaning. She carries within her the knowledge that love flows through, not to. If he leaves, she remains whole. If he stays, she remains free. The psyche has taught her that every encounter serves the same purpose, to draw consciousness closer to its source. She greets each ending as continuation, each beginning as remembrance. Her love is circular, not linear. It begins where it ends and ends where it begins in herself. The woman who lives from this center does not seek validation, yet she inspires devotion. She does not pursue, yet she is pursued. Men are drawn to her not by desire alone, but by the peace she radiates, a peace they crave, because it mirrors what is dormant within them. Her silence humbles them, her presence steadies them. Without intention, she becomes the axis around which others find orientation. In the collective, such women carry healing force. The culture, addicted to noise and speed, begins to remember the value of stillness through them. Their refusal to compete with masculine aggression restores balance to the psyche of the age. They are the living symbols of integration, walking reminders that power and tenderness are not enemies, that receptivity is strength, that being is action. Through them, humanity rediscovers the rhythm of the soul, and yet she remains human, still capable of longing, of error, of grief. Wholeness is not perfection but inclusion. She knows her light only because she has befriended her shadow. She welcomes imperfection as evidence of life's movement. When pain returns, as it will, she listens. When fear whispers, she smiles. The psyche's work never ends, it only deepens. She serves that work gladly, knowing that every descent refines the gold already won. In the quiet of her solitude, she may sometimes feel the presence of all who came before, the men she loved, the women who guided her, the ancestors who whispered through dream. They gather around her as symbols of her own evolution. She thanks them and lets them fade. She has become what they were seeking, the vessel of the self, the place where opposites unite without conflict, where love is both personal and eternal. At last, she understands what the words "make him need you" truly mean. Not manipulation, not seduction, but embodiment. When she becomes whole, he feels that wholeness and hungers to remember it in himself. Her presence awakens his deepest instinct not to consume, but to transform. Through her, he glimpses the possibility of reunion with the divine, and whether he stays or departs, that glimpse will mark him forever. In this way, she fulfills her destiny, to bring consciousness into love, to make visible the unseen harmony of the world. She is not above others, but among them, carrying the seen light quietly through ordinary gestures, a word, a glance, a moment of understanding. Her gift is not to dazzle, but to remind. And those who meet her will never again mistake noise for depth, nor hunger for devotion, for they will have seen the self shining through human eyes. This is the final transformation, when the woman no longer seeks to be remembered because she is remembrance itself. The archetype has come full circle, from longing to love, from love to wisdom, from wisdom to peace. She has become what all longing secretly desires, the living symbol of wholeness through which life at last recognizes itself.